I feel very privileged to have been asked to say a few words about Alf. My association with Alf started in 1939. I was 9 years old and living in a big house that's still standing on Clark Drive in Hastings. And in the summertime, I would sell flowers in the district from my mother's garden. I think they were 35 cents a bunch. And I can't recall how I happened to be up as far as Alf's first house, which was just about a half a block west of the one that we remember on Pandora and Nanaimo, just across the street from the park. And quite by accident, one day I knocked on his door with a basket of flowers, with a lot of bunches of flowers in my hand, and asked him if he was a perfect stranger to me, and I asked him if he was interested in buying some flowers. I was 9 years old, and of course he had a lot of flowers from his own garden, but oh yes, he would buy some flowers. Meanwhile, I was hearing the sounds of an accordion from somewhere just back of the living room. And he could see that my head was like this, and I was much more interested in the accordion than in selling flowers. And of course he recognized an exceptional interest in the accordion, even right then, before we even knew each other. And as fate would have it, my brothers, I'm the youngest one in the family, my two older brothers also played. They played harmonica, they played guitar, they loved the accordion. One of our close associates was Fred Mendecello, and he was an accordionist of sorts. And I even thought about taking lessons, and I thought, well, can I go to take lessons from Fred Mendecello? And he did me a big service by steering me in the direction of Alf. He said, no, I'm not a proper teacher. Go to see Alf Carlson. So by the time that I went to see Alf Carlson, he had moved to the house on the corner of Pandora and Nanaimo Street. And I took my first lessons, and then I think that I started with a loaner instrument. He gave me a small accordion to use, free of charge. I think the lessons were $2.25 at the time. And he spent a lot of time with me at lessons and so on. And I got right into it. I was very interested. And I remember distinctly that the very first accordion that I ever had cost my mother $80, and $40 of that I earned by selling flowers one summer. And it was a La Tosca model. I think you remember that, don't you, Joe? And very shortly after I had started lessons, Joe Morelli came swooping into town, and then we met, and that began a very long and close association that has remained to this day. My first lesson with Alf was in 1940. That's 50 years. Now, the thing I have to say about Alf is that, like so many people that constitute a very important part of your life and friendships and so on, he was probably the biggest single influence, not just in learning to play the accordion. That was only part of it. But he was a very wonderful influence in many different directions. For example, about learning to appreciate the world of music. Now, this is not typical of accordion teachers, because usually accordion teachers are very narrow in their view of music, the world of music. But Alf was not like that. He influenced me to acquaint myself with symphonic music, with pianists, with violinists, with the whole world of music. And if I've become a good accordionist, a world-class accordionist, I owe that fact, not just to talent, but very, very definitely, very fundamentally, I owe it to Alf's influence, not just as a teacher, but as a friend, because he steered me in the right directions and he opened me up and broadened my outlook in life and the world of music and showed me how it related to everything and the way we live and our relationships and the way that we go about studying things, learning things, reading. He introduced me to a lot of literature which I otherwise probably wouldn't have discovered. And I just could go on and on about the influences that Alf has had in my life. Probably the most important and deepest set of influences in the years that really counted when I was only 10 years old and then growing older gradually. And I used to come to lessons with my bicycle and the accordion in the basket of my bike. Because when we moved several times, I still, when I was within range, I would cycle to my lessons on when the weather permitted. And then I finally moved to Capitol Hill, and then I was taking the streetcar, which existed in those days, and taking a transfer and at the Kootenai Loop, on Boundary and Hastings, and coming all the way down for lessons and so on. And I can't recall how long my lessons kept up, but they were about 17, I think about 17 or 18 years before I finally just went on my own, and we just kept our close contact and communication after that as friends and fellow musicians. And Alf has always, I think that I don't want to take words out of other people's mouths because everyone has things to say about Alf, but I think that he was a wonderful influence on all of his students. And in the early days when I first started taking lessons, Horace Lazari was living right next door. He was boarding in a house right next door to Alf's place. And I would finish my lesson, then I would make a beeline to Horace's place. And he would play for me, and he was a wonderful role model because he was just a wonderful player, and he could play Flight of the Bumblebee and carry on a conversation with me at the same time, and I marveled at this, and I sort of used this as a guide to what was possible. And of course, that was a product of Alf's mind and teaching. Horace represented the end product of what Alf was as a teacher and educator. And then he, of course, directed all these energies and influences into me too, and I'll never stop being grateful for that. I think that I really missed him when I moved away to Portland in 1946, and I went to school there, and then I finally came back and rejoined my relatives here in Vancouver. And we had wonderful times and wonderful memories. And I have to say before I stop here that it was because of Alf that I used pianists and violinists and symphony orchestras as my role models in the world of accordion playing, rather than accordionists as role models. And that is something that very few accordionists ever get the benefit of, because Alf was a very rare teacher of the accordion, not typical at all. He was, his overview of the instrument was very broad and not typical of most accordion teachers. And I could never express strongly enough my gratitude for all of the things that Alf did for me in my own life. I think that many of the qualities that Alf possessed live not only in myself and always will, but in the other friends that also shared his influences down through the years. So thank you again for asking me to share these things with you, because it means a great deal to me to be able to express these things to you today. And I wouldn't be surprised if Alf was looking on right now. It wouldn't surprise me at all. So, anyway, we'll never forget you, Alf.